We begin this program in Russia, where firefighters, backed by the country's Air Force, are struggling to contain vast wildfires in Siberia. The area that's ablaze is continuing to grow, with some 45,000 square kilometers already affected. That's an area the size of Denmark. Officials say they've had to give up their efforts in some of the more remote areas. In the hard-hit province of Krasnoyarsk, residents are literally choking on smoke as the flames draw closer.
These crews are fighting a losing battle. Above the vast expanse of the Siberian forest, they quell fires that simmer under the canopy. Helicopters also ferry in reinforcements to combat the smouldering fire on the ground.
The difficult thing with these fires is that they cover huge areas and they're hard to reach. The most effective method is a comprehensive one. Planes pour water from above, while firefighters on the ground extinguish all the small smouldering points.
Dropped into the wild, the firefighters move through the haze in search of flames fed by the foliage.
Smoldering points are continuing to appear. We're also using machines to dig them up. We're doing our best to extinguish the fires.
The Russian government has claimed that the fires have been reduced by a quarter. But the Aerial Forest Protection Service admits that it's given up on 2.4 million hectares of forest, only monitoring the fires in those areas from space. Greenpeace, meanwhile, has sounded the alarm over the environmental impact of the wildfires. The fires are also having a direct impact on people in the region. The village of Boguchani lies around 100 kilometers from the blaze, but heavy smog has shrouded the village, creating a health hazard for residents.
It's been a long time since we've seen smog that stayed around for so long. We can't breathe anymore. Even in our apartment, we can smell this smoke. It's a feeling that never leaves you. It's really hard to breathe. With all this, chronic coughs appear in both children and adults.
10,000 firefighters have been dispatched to Siberia. But with fires still raging in vast tracts of land, villages like this will not have a clear view of the sun for some time yet.
Let's get the very latest on this now from our Moscow correspondent, Emily Sherwin. Good day to you, Emily. Why are firefighters having such a hard time getting these blazes under control?
Well, first of all, Brian, that's because the area that's burning is just so huge. As we just heard, and as you've said as well, the area of Denmark, apparently it's just over 4 million hectares that are burning. Siberia is huge as it is anyway. A state of emergency has been declared in 5 regions in Russia. There are forest fires every year in the taiga, but these are just unprecedented. And the other problem is that many of the areas that are burning are so remote, they're very, very hard for firefighters to reach, nearly impossible, the authorities say.
Okay, they're remote areas, but nonetheless, there are growing calls inside Russia and internationally to change how Moscow fights fires in Siberia. What's Russia not getting right on this?
And there's been growing anger as well among people here who say they've been being choked by smoke coming from those fires. The authorities are acting. Last week, Putin called the army to help put out fires. There have been planes that have been dropping water on the area affected, and there have been reports of successes as well. Authorities say that they've been battling the fires on over 100,000 hectares, but they also say that they have actually been leaving 2 million hectares. They've given up on them simply because they're too hard to reach. That's a huge territory as well. According to Russian law, this is actually policy. There are so-called control zones that authorities have simply declared too hard to reach in case of a fire, where authorities by law aren't obliged to put them out. And there is actually a law from 2015 as well that states that if the cost of fighting fires exceeds the potential damages, then authorities do not have to put them out. So this is kind of a policy here in Russia.
Okay, now Greenpeace is calling these fires a climate catastrophe. Can you give us an idea of the scope of the environmental damage?
Well, what's worrying here is, of course, because of the scale of these fires, there's a huge amount of CO2 being released in the atmosphere, which could, of course, speed up climate change. There's also black carbon, which is being emitted by the fires, and that can settle on Arctic ice and also speed up the melting of that Arctic ice. Again, bad for the climate overall. And plus, there's the trees. Huge areas of trees are simply dying or simply burning down. The taiga is one of the green lungs of the world, and scientists say that these trees could take around 100 years to grow back. So it's understandable that Greenpeace is calling this an ecological catastrophe.
Emily, thanks so much for that from Moscow.